I'd like to first thank our tireless AIA staff, your tireless AIA staff. That includes Ingrid, Julia, Bridget, Courtney, Rob, and all of the volunteers you've seen here today that made this event possible. We all hope you found yesterday's talks inspiring, and today's perhaps even more so. Our mayor is here to speak. We are thrilled to have him, and this has been a mayor that has sort of built bridges to the design community and has really seen the people in this room and the people that we affect as sort of partners in Austin's future, so we're very pleased about that. Before we welcome Mayor Adler, I'd like to thank our keynote sponsor today, Dalglish Construction, who many of you will know. John Cameron from Dowlich's team is here today. John, you can raise your hand if anyone would like to speak with John after this talk. They have supported AIA Austin for over a decade. Thank you for that. We love the quality of their work and for the continuous commitment to serving our community. All right. Mayor Adler is going to champion innovation and creative leadership in all domains. These include social equity, preservation of our natural environment, sustainability, entrepreneurship, and design excellence in our built environment. He is a member of the Mayor's Institute for City Design, and last year brought the regional meeting to Austin. Mayor Adler and the City of Austin have been forming more collaborative and strong relationships with the design community, including the University of Texas School of Architecture, which recently changed public and civic leadership's perspective of the convention center expansion, which indeed may change an entire sector of our downtown for the better. Advocated by Mayor Adler and City Council leaders, the City of Austin and AIA have collaborated on testing and analysis of the past Code Next effort. That effort put the current code rewrite into a much stronger and more informed starting position, so we look forward to seeing that code perhaps in the fall. We also understand that the mayor's next major area of focus will be Austin's complex transportation and mobility challenges, a huge sort of task. And we look forward to hearing about that as the months go on. As AIA Austin and Austin's Foundation for Architecture move on our plans to create a Center for Architecture and Design for our profession to maintain relevancy and sort of build deeper connections with our city, we look forward to continued conversations on these important topics with our mayor and our community. And now, please join me in welcoming our friend, the 52nd mayor of the great city of Austin, Texas, Mayor Steve Adler.
Well, good morning, and I appreciate the invitation to come back to visit with you all. I woke up this morning, and as it invariably is, I get emails from my staff telling me what's out on social media that I need to look at. I try not generally to look at it just because I don't have the time to look at it. But from time to time, there are folks on there, believe it or not, that disagree with me. And you take all that stuff, and sometimes you read it, sometimes you don't. But I was really excited to see that as I'm getting ready to head to speak to you guys, one of the lead emails from the staff was a blog, sending to me a blog from one of the kind of the what I call the do-nothing voices in Austin. Folks that I think are looking backwards to find our greatness as opposed to forward to find our greatness. But I was pleased to see that it wasn't addressed at me at all in particular. This morning's blog was addressed to the new left urbanists who want to remake your city. You can't see this, but this is a horrific looking dragon with fire coming out. And today, the enemy of success and progress and achievement and quality of life is Americans' big cities are almost dominated by the Democratic Party, but the politics of urban development are far from monolithic. In the past few years, a new faction has emerged across the country. Call them new left urbanists. I think that's the problem. These activists have big dreams. They want local governments to rebuild the urban environment, housing, transit, roads, and tolls, to achieve social justice, racial justice, and net zero carbon emissions. They rally around slogans such as ban all cars, and raise the suburbs, and single-family housing is white supremacy. Though they're generally white and affluent themselves, often employed in public or semi-public roles of urban planning, housing development, and social advocacy, they treat public housing, mass transit, and bike lanes as a holy trinity. They want to impose their religion on you. Isn't it nice? It's not about me at all. Just thought I'd share this morning's blog. You know, there are so many things that are magical and wonderful about this city. Just in the last few weeks, I've had the opportunity again to get out on the road and go by the cities. I was in Los Angeles and Seattle, and I was in Denver and Indianapolis. Just before that, I was in Saltillo and Monterrey. You visit other cities, and there's always things to learn, and there are always things that are beautiful to see, and things that you wish you had back home. But the more cities I visit, in an ever-increasing fervency, I love this place, and I love the balance that we have here, and I love the people and culture that exists here. We have a very vibrant economy. We have an unemployment rate that's like way too low. We're actually holding steady on violent crime. We're the fourth safest big city in the country, and much closer to number 1 than we are to number 5. This is a city of opportunity. It's a city where people want to come, which is why for the 8th year in a row, we're the fastest growing by rate large metropolitan area in the country, which is an incredibly hard thing to do just mathematically because of what that does to the denominator in the equation every year. Just hard to sustain, but yet we are. This is a phenomenal place. But we also have some pretty significant Achilles heels. And our Achilles heels are not that much different, perhaps, than other cities, but they stand out in larger contrasts, more stark relief, perhaps because there are things that are going so well in the city. And my sense is that, Austin has done well in the 40 years that I've been here. But probably in those 40 years, we were able to absorb mistakes and missed opportunities and really not lose our march forward. I'm concerned that as we grow larger and as the competition becomes more intense and as the balances become more precarious, that we're not going to have the same luxury of missing opportunities and not paying for it, or getting things wrong and not paying for it, or not planning and thinking in advance and not paying for it. Because our challenges are great. In this city, the life expectancy if you grow up on the west side of town is 10 years longer than it is if you grew up on the east side of our town. In one city. To me, that's just an amazing statistic. It is horrific to think about. Embodied in that statistic are so many things. Embodied in that statistic are the discrepancies we have with respect to income and health and access to food, family, wealth, transportation. I mean, that's a statistic that at the end of the day embodies so many of the other issues, the institutional racism and systemic inequities that exist because we continue to live in a system that was set up, as we all know, the darker moments of Boston's history, and institutions are hard to change. But we have to. We have to get this right if we're going to preserve what it is that is magical and special about this place. I want to talk today briefly about 7 different design challenges that this city has that are core to us being able to do something about equity in this city. These 7 design challenges are not the answer to equity in this city, but they have to be part of the answer to equity. And they have the opportunity to actually get us to better places than we might otherwise have been in trying to realize real equity and access and opportunity in our city. So I want to touch real briefly on the convention center expansion, on the Waterloo Greenway, on Home Depot up north at St. John's, Land Development Code rewrite, I-35, Project Connect, and then I want to talk about homelessness in the city of Austin. And then I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as I can so that we actually have time for questions at the end of this. I want to say that more and more, to an ever-increasing degree, we are directly involved with this association, this group, on these issues. And I want to thank you on behalf of a really grateful city and city staff for the involvement and participation that you guys bring. On a lot of these questions, the architects and design folks in our city have been like the cavalry coming over the hill. And it feels that way sometimes. Well, let's talk real quickly about the convention center expansion. Located in the southeast quadrant of our city, probably the most difficult part of our city to develop and plan and have realized in a way that works. We just drive around and look at that part of town. And probably one of the significant reasons that part of town has not developed the way that we might want it to have developed is because of the existing convention center, where we have 6 blocks in a very large building with virtually no active space at the ground level. It's not an area where people in the community go. Visitors go there, which is great for the city for economics. But the fact that our convention center does not work as well as it might right now is the biggest obstacle in building a convention center that might actually be an incredible asset to our city. Because when people hear about convention centers, that's what they think of. When you say you want to expand a convention center or do something with a convention center, that's what people think. And in this community, that building does not have a very large constituency for the building itself, or for the area that developed immediately around the convention center. But yet it has huge potential. You know, that whole area has pretty huge potential. You know, it abuts the historic 6th Street, which is an area that I can remember in my first 20 years in the city as a really exciting place. A lot of families that went down, there were a lot of family places on 6th Street. One of the most popular family restaurants was in 6th Street. In that area in the late 70s and into the 80s. Now it's primarily shop bars and an entirely different feel in that area. There's some wonderful historical buildings that we have never really taken the steps to preserve and to protect. It's an area where we have some of our most iconic clubs with music that are being chased away. We have the arch down there, but more significant than the arch is the activity that's occurring outside of the arch. That in many respects is unrelated to the activities happening inside the arch. We have the potential in that area to really do some incredible placemaking. We've never really been able to figure out how to attach Rainy Street to the rest of the city, and it's really hard to get in there. Once you get in there, it's hard to get out of there. We have the Mexican-American Cultural Center in that area that's buried and difficult to get to, and it's difficult to program. A phenomenal asset for our community that we're not able to take best advantage of. That is a really exciting part of our town. We talked about pulling it all together using the convention center and its expansion, which, because of state law, limits how we can use hotel taxes in the city. The state legislature, in order to incent cities to build convention centers, said if you're willing to build a convention center, we will open up a faucet of money that's otherwise not available to you. Millions of dollars that you can spend on art, millions of dollars that you can spend on historic preservation that you can't get unless you do a hotel expansion. But if you do a hotel expansion, then you get the access to those funds. That's how we fund right now the cultural arts in this city. That's how we fund in this town right now most of the historic preservation that the city and that the public does in our city, and we have a chance to increase that pie. We have a homelessness challenge. I'll talk about that at the end, but in relation to the convention center, you're not allowed to use any of that hotel tax money on issues like homelessness or affordable housing in the city. Because the legislature, again, limited what you could use hotel tax money for. But what they did say, in a different part of the statute, is that the hotel industry is able to access that tax too. They can put on up to 2% of the tax on hotel rooms if they want to, but the city has to approve it. The city can't mandate it because it's their choice, but the city has the ability to say yes or no. Well, we can use that money for homelessness because it doesn't have the same restrictions. So we've gone to the industry, and the industry instead they'll give us 40% of that money to apply to homelessness, operating expenses, to sheltering in a city that desperately needs funding to be able to do that. That becomes part of the convention center because the industry wants the convention center expanded. But it becomes part then of these interrelating moving pieces that we have that can really do great things for our city, but it all revolves around a convention center. When people think about a convention center, they're not too excited about it. They like all the other stuff, they like what it brings, but really, is there a way to do this without a convention center? Can we just mainline it into arts and historic preservation? No, we have to do a convention center. Wouldn't it be great if when people thought about a convention center, they went through the same process that people in this city now go through when they think about libraries? Remember what it was like when we told people we were going to spend $120 million on the library? Everybody thought about the library in their neighborhood. And when they thought about the library they went to when they were growing up, why in the world would anybody take a big piece of downtown property, a valuable piece of downtown property, and build a library on it? I mean, who reads books now anyhow? It's all electronic, and it's all digital at this point. And why do we need a library? Except that we now have this cathedral in our city. Time magazine says one of the top 100 places to visit in the world. People are proud of that library the same way they're proud of our airport. Both, by the way, I think because of design issues, program issues, curation issues. Why? Wouldn't it be great if people thought about convention centers the same way? But they don't. So we had a debate at the city council that was kept bucking up against that wall for years. And then we brought in the University of Texas School of Architecture. We brought in the UT Department for Sustained Development, Design. And they came back to the entire city and they said, don't think about the convention center as an opportunity to do real placemaking in the city. A place that can be active on the ground floor, a place that can tie into the rest of the community, a place that can draw people in, a place that can provide the functional needs that a convention center needs to provide. But let us show you what we can do with 2nd Street if we use a convention center as a catalyst. Let us show you how you can tie Waller Creek, which I'll talk about in a second, to the rest of the city if you do a convention center. Let us show you how you can do a convention center and not give up the airspace up above, so you lose the Adler tax value and the activation that comes from having people planted and around and living around a space like that. It completely changed the debate in this community. If someone had told me we were going to get a unanimous vote for a convention center 2 years ago, I would have laughed. I still would have thought we were going to get it done, but I would have laughed to think that we would have actually had a unanimous vote, and we did, and it was because of design work and thinking about how design could impact that in our city. There's not a lot we're going to do in this city that's going to have a greater impact on equity and access in this city than the convention center expansion, because of the doors that it opens up for arts and historic preservation and for money that we can spend on homelessness in our city. I want to talk, while we're talking about University of Texas being involved in projects, Home Depot. There's a property up in St. John's, used to be an old Home Depot building. The city bought that building for a police substation. Police substation's never been built on it. It's built in one of the poorest areas of our entire city. It's an area that, as soon as we do anything to improve that area, it's going to immediately become one of the fastest gentrifying parts of our city, because it's so close to downtown and because property values are so depressed right now in that area because of everything that's happening. This gives rise to the age-old question of, you have an area that is depressed, and then you have people living there in conditions that are not like as good as you might find in other parts of the city. They don't have the parks, they don't have the transportation access. But as soon as you start supplying those kinds of things, then other people want to live there too, and prices immediately start going up, and then the people that you wanted to get those amenities for are among the first people, and they're not be able to enjoy them because they have to leave. How do you do that? How do you do a significant development in the city and still protect the people that are there, provide services for the people there? Can you, in fact, design and plan a big tract like that in a way that holds people, that anchors people and cultures, instead of immediately pushing them away? Clearly, the will is not there to put a police substation on that property. But we really don't know what to do with it. We've turned to the University of Texas again, and we've asked the design people in our community to take a look at that piece of property, because it is a linchpin. And what we learn from how we develop that property, I hope, are lessons and instructions that we can take to developments all around the rest of the city, because that's going to be a recurrent issue for us time and time and time again. And if we're not thoughtful about it, we know exactly what's going to happen in the city, because we have examples of cities that have not been able to get out in front of that. The market decides the questions before the planners have the ability to be able to imagine and construct. Waterloo Greenway, just renamed, used to be Walnut Creek Conservancy, now the Waterloo Greenway, as of the last 48 hours, has a chance to be, I think, perhaps the only thing that people 150 years from now remember about our time. People will think, I wonder who it was, or who it was that lived then when that park was created. It could be, should be Austin's highlight, like in New York. It should be the counterbalance to Silver Park on both sides of our downtown core area, soon to be well within our downtown core area. That's a phenomenal development that's going. It's a public-private partnership. It's, $150 million of private philanthropy, $150 million of public funding to return to Austin, an area that was never developed because of the flood issues now pure. It's something that runs from Rainy Street up to the University of Texas through the middle of the innovation zone in the city with a pavilion for outdoor concerts. Even before that park has opened, as it's getting ready to open, how many of you have attended the Light Festival in December that they do there? You all see that? You know, I'm not sure that I have been to an event in Austin in my 40 years in the city that was as racially and ethnically diverse as were the crowds at those events. It feels right. If we're able to build a park that stitches together east and west and downtown and beyond, if we're able to stitch together community in an active place where people gather for free and our community, what an incredible place that will be. If we're able to scale from those light events into our city, that could be a huge change agent within the city that we have. We also have as a design challenge in our city coming up. It's obviously one that's been with us for a while, is the Land Development Code. You know, we were 6 years in trying to get that done. We pulled it down last August. It's now come back again. My hope is that we had a first reading of the Land Development Code done by the City Council in December. The development of the City Code obviously is where in some measures, where the tectonic plates meet in our city. I mean, do we need more development or do we not need more development? And if we do, how much and what kind and where? And the development code, while it doesn't dictate the answer to those questions, it has a huge influence on those. How a city actually contributes to climate change mitigation, and recognize that over 50% of the goal in the Paris Accord signed by the nation states, over 50% of the goal for climate mitigation has to be realized at the local government level. We do that in large measure in how we write our land development code, how things are built, where they're built, both materials, how they're built in proximity to one another. Land development code is huge on transportation issues, where people gather, how you move people through a city, how it feels to live in a city. All the questions that the dragon of that opening blog are asking come to that place. And in a city like Austin, where we all so desperately love this city, a city where for almost all of us, our favorite day in this city was our first day in this city, because we can remember the way it used to be back before all those other people started arriving in our city. But a city that nonetheless does change well. The things that I loved about this city 40 years ago are still the things that I love about this city today. In part because the way we have built our city attracts people like the people who live here. And it's the people and the culture that drive those values. We've been able to hold that as we've done change. How do we do a land development code to ensure that for the next 20 years, our current is 30 years old, and going forward, how do we continue to do that? Everybody loves this city, but people have really different paths in mind about what it takes to say what it is that's special and magical about this place. I'm really excited with the direction that this council took when we gave really specific direction to the city manager earlier this spring and said, come back to a draft. Because we were able to decide a lot of policy questions that had never come to the city council. In the prior process in Code Next, the council took, I think, a pretty safe place, which was way out of the frame, and let the community and the commissions and the boards and the neighborhoods and everyone interested battle each other on the field of the land development code rewrites. I think that we didn't do what we should have done as a council, which is to weigh in and say, as the elected representatives of the city, this is the direction we should follow. So rather than having everybody argue about this for 6 more months, this one aspect, let's take a vote on that aspect. And then that aspect is decided. And then we can debate and discuss a different element of the community. And the council can decide and point to a direction. The council pretty much stayed far back from that frame. That's not what we did last spring. We tried to take the hardest questions and see if we could reach a decision on those. And what we realized is that once we got into that and started doing it, that we could find a place where most of the people could agree. We were able to move forward because there was unanimous agreement on so many of the issues. Yes, we're going to increase housing supply in the city. Yes, we're going to increase the housing capacity in the city at a multiple of the supply we need so that it can be built. Yes, we're going to target density along transportation corridors, but not just on the corridors. But we recognize that in order to be able to realize the density on the corridors, there's going to have to be some kind of transition between the density on the corridors and the neighborhoods that nearly abut them. And we set up rules to have some kind of transition that gave us middle missing housing in the city. And then we reached really the consensus by saying that we want this all tied to affordability. There haven't been cities that have developed in a way that have tied affordability so directly to new entitlements as what I think the city of Austin is about to try. We need your help in doing that, and we're getting that help. There are testing that's going on, and neighborhoods and communities are giving us suggestions and advice. You primarily among those groups, not primarily, but materially among those groups. But that's going to be a design issue that's going to decide who we are. Perhaps the most important thing we're going to do the next 2 years in the city is Project Connect. We don't have a mass public transportation system that moves people around. Probably one of the biggest elements that retards equity and access and opportunity in our city because people can't get around. I was just in Indianapolis, I said a week ago, a much smaller city than we are, just now launching a center-running BRT system in their city. And I'm so envious of Indianapolis, a Rust Belt city that somehow or another has been able to get to mass transit, retrofit a city for mass transit when we can't. We're going to take that vote in November of 2020 at the same time we have the next presidential election. I trust and hope that this community will have on the ballot something that is an absolute game changer for this city. Best as I can tell from talking to people around the city, the only thing we can do wrong in making a proposal to the community is not going far enough, because people want something that will actually improve mobility in this city. When I mentioned to people that under consideration of taking cars under the drag so that you don't drive down the drag anymore, just buses on the surface level, the thought that we would build a tunnel like that in the city is liberating for the community. How do you do a mass transit system? You know, every bus we have in this city, North Lamar, MLK, South Lamar, the reaches of the city is limited on the frequency with which it can operate, because when the buses come to and pass through downtown, they back up because of the traffic we have downtown. What if we took the entire mass transit system and put it underground downtown in a 15-block area? We would improve transportation services throughout our region if we did something like that. This is the conversation we're about to have in the city. That is going to be laid out for everybody beginning in October. There'll be a recommendation in December. The City Council and the Cap Metro Board will make a decision in March, and that's what we'll take to the voters in November. And it will be the largest bond election in the history of our region. On the day that we passed our $700 million transportation bond in 2016, it was our Go Big bond, just by reference point. Phoenix was passing the bond for $26 billion. Seattle was passing the bond for $56 billion. We don't have the capacity to do that. We don't have the tools that their state legislatures give those cities, nor do we have the same state support that those cities have. But we have to go big ourselves. We actually have to realize that opportunity for our city, or we will not be a city that preserves its quality of life through the next 15 years. I want to close real fast talking about homelessness. Homelessness right now is something that is obviously on the top of everyone's mind in our city. First thing I want to say is that we created no new homeless people in June or July or earlier this month. Everybody that everybody sees have been living here before we took action in June. Second thing I want to say is that no one in this city wants camping in this city, anywhere in this city. It's not humane. It's not the safest and best place for anybody to be. Everyone in this city is united in trying to figure out how it is we can stop camping in our city. The question is, how do you get there? I've spent the last 2 years, to an ever-increasing degree, before June, going to neighborhood association meetings all over the city with people, neighborhoods that are just beyond angry and frustrated, scared. I went to the neighborhood meeting in Onion Creek, and they were talking to me about the homeless camp that existed at the Slaughter Lane overpass at I-35. I had a gentleman come up to me and say, if I didn't fix what was happening under the I-35, he was concerned about his wife, he was concerned about his daughters. If I didn't fix it, if the city didn't fix it, he was going to get his gun. He would fix it. That was not the first time or the only time that I heard something like that. This is a challenge we have that cities across the country are having, but it's significantly a challenge here. By the way, just for reference point, the homeless count in Austin went up 4% last year. 4%. National average, 5%. Dallas, 9%. Seattle, that has 200,000 fewer people than we have, has 6 times as many people experiencing homelessness. Los Angeles spent $200 million last year, housed 20,000 people, and their homelessness count went up by 16%. 40,000 people living homeless in LA City, 60,000 in LA County. You want to know what cities, the rest of the cities look to when they find a city that they think is the model cities for doing things right about homelessness? Surprise, Austin. We were one of the few cities in the country to be able to achieve net zero veteran homelessness. That doesn't mean that there aren't any homeless vets. It means that when we find a homeless vet in the city, we get them into a house in 60 days and services right away. We took half of the homeless children off our streets last year with a federal grant. We know what works in this city, but we haven't been able to scale it. We need to do better. You know, there are people in this city that are concerned just about people. And there are people in this city that are concerned just about places. We live in a city where most people are concerned about both. But it doesn't make any difference where you enter that equation, because the answer, regardless of how you enter it, is to find people homeless. So I go talk to the people at Slaughter Lane and I say, you know, we can fence off the overpass. We can fence it off and we can make sure that there are no people camping in that location. The problem is that when we fence off the underpass at Slaughter, those folks don't disappear. It's unlike fixing a broken window in New York that Giuliani had with his crime prevention plan. If you start fixing all the broken windows, then the crime rate goes down. Because when you fix that broken window, another broken window doesn't spontaneously open up 2 blocks away. That's what happens with people. If you fence off Slaughter Lane, they end up at the overpass at Manchac and Van White. Except that I also spent time with the neighborhood association and walking the camp in that location. Also Wong Fortune. Also with a neighborhood that was absolutely angry and demanding that we do something about the encampment of people that were experiencing homelessness. We cannot keep telling people they have to move if we can't tell them where to go. Between 2014 and 2016, this city wrote 18,000 tickets to people for camping sitting in line. As you might imagine, very few of those people end up in court, showing up in court the following Thursday to pay their fine. What happens instead is almost all of them have a bench warrant issued for their arrest. And then when they look for a job or when they look for an apartment later on, that's on their record. And then they can't get the job and they can't get the apartment. We realized that didn't work. So after 2016, we adopted a policy in the city where we threatened people with a ticket and an arrest in order to induce them to just move. And very proudly, we touted a 98% compliance rate. 98% of the time when we would send law enforcement in, they would say, you have to move. She would start gathering her stuff up. She would say, officer, please don't arrest me. Please don't give me a ticket. I'm gathering my stuff up. I'm trying to comply. And as she's gathering her stuff up, she looks at the police officer and she says, where do you want me to go? I'm leaving here. Where should I go? And the officer says to her, ma'am, I don't know where you should go, but I just know you can't be here. So she gets up and she moves to another place, which, by the way, she was not allowed to be because there was no place she was allowed to be, really, so that we could go through that process yet again. How many times do we have to do that? We're spending millions and millions of your taxpayer dollars doing that. I was with Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles 3 weeks ago, asking him not what he was doing that was right, asking him if he could go back 10, 12 years, what should LA have done back then that they didn't do to avoid where they are? And what he told me was this. He said, you know, we adopted Giuliani's policy. We strengthened our ordinances on no camp, no sit, no lie. We became really aggressive about enforcing that. And we were able to clear our streets. Any business that called in that people were going to, we cleared homelessness in our city. He said the problem is that we didn't actually house people. We didn't actually do anything with people that were experiencing homelessness. We moved them. We felt good in the moment that we moved them because that situation in that moment felt better. And he said that in 4 years, our police came back to us and they said it's working, 98% compliance rate. But we need more money now because they're doing people experiencing homelessness. We can keep doing this. We can keep moving people around, but we need more officers. Garcetti said, you're going to do that. You're going to pay for the more officers that way because politically that's going to be the right thing to do, and practically it does seem to help in that moment. So you pay for more officers, and then he said, then it's going to be another 4 years, maybe 6 years later, they're going to be back again. They're going to say, hey, this is working. We're still getting 98% compliance, but darned if we don't need more police officers because the problem continues to get larger for us. And at that point, somebody in your community is going to look up and say, we can't sustain this. We have to do something different. The problem is that when you get to that place, you're going to have 6 times as many experiencing homelessness as you have today. The same thing that Ginny said. Ginny pointed out to me, by the way, that the housing price in Seattle 6 years ago was on top of the housing price in Austin today. So we could go through that process. I said, well, why didn't you build the houses back then? What was it that stopped you from doing it back then? And he said it wasn't until we got to where we are today that people were finally focused on the challenge and were willing to make the decisions, where people would realize that it wasn't government alone that needed to solve that, but we were all in this together, that this kind of issue requires community. This kind of issue requires philanthropy. It involves and requires faith-based organizations and neighborhoods. If we're going to solve this issue, it's everybody together. He said, we are here. We are at that moment today. But we have 40,000 people that are experiencing homelessness. And then he looked at me and he said, I forgot what you told me. How many homeless people do you have in Austin? I said, 2,255. And he laughed at me. We don't want anyone camping in our city. But when we ask somebody to move, this community has to be able to do a better job. When they say, where do you want me to go? Then saying, I don't know. But I just don't need to move. And how we answer this question is as much a design question as anything else. It is the intersection of public policy and design. Haven for Hope is a great program in San Antonio. Haven for Hope. It's moved a lot of people into an area where they can get services. Haven for Hope is a $100 million structure just outside of downtown. Around the perimeter, it has some housing. In the middle of it is a vast courtyard with 700 people in it living on pallets. Most people don't know what's happening in the middle of that courtyard because you can't see it, because there's a building with a courtyard in the middle. There's 700 people that are there. There's not a good place for those people to move out of Haven for Hope and into a home, because that part of the infrastructure hasn't been built out in San Antonio. It's not a knock on San Antonio. It hasn't been built out in many places. It hasn't been built out here. Community First, a great design opportunity, doing great work in our city. 250 people there. It's not the answer for everybody on the continuum, because everybody's different. There's a lot of people get here differently. Did you know that over half the people homeless in our city are people that are transitionally homeless? They don't have a drug problem or an alcohol problem. Perfect storm. They lost their spouse and their children and their job, maybe a medical issue, and their home all at the same time. And they ended up on the street. If we can get that person into a home immediately in the next few months, that person will be back in society stabilized in 3 months. Do you know how long it is to get a home in Austin when that person signs up to get a home today? A year and a half. We can't leave people out on the streets that long, because when we do, they're harder to pull back. Community First, great thing. Now undergoing phase 2. Diane and I contributed both to phase 1 and to phase 2. Phase 3, should we have 1,200 of our homeless people all in the same place? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a substantive expert. But I do know that how we design housing, how we design communities, in the challenge that we have right now with homelessness, has to be one of the critical features of whatever answer it is for a community like ours that cares both about people and about places, to actually reach net effective zero homelessness in our community, which is a goal I absolutely believe we can achieve if we focus on solving the problem. All of these are design questions. I'm going to stop. Maybe there's time to answer a question or two. I don't know if I'm going to talk too long. A couple questions. Thank you for the opportunity to be back. I meant when I said that when I look out at this crowd, it is really like looking at the cavalry coming over the hill. We need your help. Questions? Anybody have any? Yes, sir.
Of those goals, which one would you say is the most important? If you you would pick one.
The most important goal, you know, it's impossible to pick one. I mean, it is absolutely impossible to pick one. But, you know, any one of those, if we don't solve right, any one of those, if we don't solve right, we lose what's special about this place. I'm sorry, I can't pick it. Yes, sir.
I would just like to ask a personal question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You and I met one time when you were considering running for mayor for your first term, and you were very gracious and friendly. And I just wonder, how do you, when you look back to that time, that many years ago, how do you see your term, and how has your life been since you made that decision to run?
So the question is, we met back when I was running for this office for the first time, so that would have been 6 years ago. And the question is, how do I see my term and how do I see my life, you know, kind of looking back. I ran in part because I love this city and it had given so much to us, and Diane and I were in a position to do this. Our 3 girls had just left. My business was doing really well. I had a small little boutique law firm. Because the system of government is changing, going from at-large to district. Most cities and counties that do that, the government fails because it devolves into a war politic. I wanted to be part of trying to preserve the work. We gave up a lot to be able to do this job. But I believe in this job. I believe that government at city level has the ability to impact people's lives. It's more immediate in ways that government at the state level and the federal government can't. What I would say is that the job is wonderful in so many different ways. It's also hard. And it's hard because there's so much incoming volume all the time. And there's so many questions that require immediate attention that it's really hard to focus on the really big, long-term, planning-related issues. And that's what I have tried to do in the 5 years. You know, this is unlike any job I've ever had. When you're in school, you know you're going to graduate, but it's kind of open-ended. Every professional job I've had, I couldn't have told you for sure if I was going to be doing it for 2 years or 10 years. And every year it was kind of like expanding on that. In this job, I know exactly how many minutes I have left. Sure. It changes your whole perspective on time, because when I run out of those precious minutes, then I give this job, I hand over this job, I pass this job to someone else. I just hope that we continue to focus on the really, really big things, because it's easier not to. But at the end of my minutes, I don't want there to have been a really important big thing that we didn't pick up because it was hard. Because if we don't pick it up, it's going to be that much harder for the next person. I love this job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for